that you're with us here again today. My name is Michelle Gatewood. I am the Deputy Executive Director here at Contact Careline. And with me, as usual, is
I'm Azita. I am our Clinical Program Director at Contact. And our special guest today, Patricia Markwell.
We're so excited to have you here, Patricia.
Thank you guys so much for inviting me today to come on to the podcast. I'm so grateful for you both. And my name is Patricia Markwell. I'm with Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners. We're here in Denver, Colorado, and I am the Director of Development. And so I do all the fundraising and development here for our nonprofit organization. And I've been with the organization for 6 years. I'm really grateful. I started out on the crisis lines and moved into a substance use response coordinator position, and then moved into doing some development. I've had about 20 years fundraising and developing nonprofits throughout the nonprofit sector throughout the state of Colorado. And so, but I know today we're going to be talking a lot about substance use, and I wanted to share. I've been in recovery from multiple substances for almost 6 years. I got sober August 2019. So really grateful to be here today and share some of my wisdom about recovery and living life with substance use disorder.
We are talking about substance use this time around, and I think you bring just such a wonderful blend of that mental health professional experience as well as that lived experience that is so valuable. So let's dive right into asking our experts some questions that hopefully will help those of you watching with just some awareness and maybe some tools for tough moments to take forward in your personal lives and the lives of the people that you care about. So the first thing that I think we'd like you to help us with, Patricia, could you help us understand the difference between casual or social substance use and when it might start to become a problem for an individual?
I think it becomes a problem when substances start taking priority over your life. So your responsibilities, your relationships, your health, for example. I think for me, it started as something, I was prescribed, I had a surgery done, and I was prescribed opioids to manage that pain. But over time, I became clearly very dependent on those opioids. And I thought, well, I was prescribed this medication, like I can use it, because I was prescribed, and then it just became a problem. And so, I think when you feel like you need it rather than you choose to use it, like alcohol, I went from opioids to using copious amount of alcohol to cope with not using opioids. And so I think when you feel like you need it rather than you choose it, there's definitely like a big shift in there. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It does. So with that, I wonder, are there things that loved ones should be paying attention for? Changes in moods, behaviors, things like that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that, loved ones can really pay attention to if they're starting to see, their loved ones using more substances. I think the biggest one is it changes in their mood. If they're isolating, kind of that secrecy, inconsistency. I know for me, I became less reliable, and more withdrawn, and my priorities shifted. I was so focused in my work before using substances. And then when I was using substances, it was like, when am I going to get the next drink, or when am I going to use the next pill, essentially? So someone who is starting to show up differently emotionally, and their behavior is different. I think that's something that it's worth paying attention to. It's definitely worth, having a conversation with, and talking to them about. And I'm just noticing, some changes, what's going on, or pointing out specifically, hey, see that your drinking has increased. Is there something I can do to help support you in that? My loved ones, I wouldn't be here today without them if they didn't point out my own inconsistencies in my behavior. So I'm grateful to them very much.
We're looking for, either in ourselves or in other people, kind of shrinking back from who we are when we are our whole, complete, authentic selves.
Yeah.
And that probably does become really evident, maybe even more so to the people in our lives before it becomes evident to us.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I'd really like to know from your perspective, both as a professional and someone with lived experience. Why do you think it's hard for people to recognize when their own use is becoming a concern?
I think denial is very powerful, right? I know for me, I could justify everything. I was prescribed these opioids after a surgery, and after using the opioids for 4 years, I could not get a prescription for it. And so I was able to come off of these opioids, probably not in the safest way. There are many different ways to come off of them, but then I coped by using alcohol. So over time, I really normalized my behavior, especially it was a gradual process, but I didn't feel like it was a problem until it became clearly a problem. I lost a lot through 13 years of active addiction. I lost jobs, I lost relationships with family members and friends, I lost my house and housing. So there was a lot of loss that came out because of my use. At first, I was in complete denial because, a doctor prescribed me these meds and I felt like I needed them. I think at the time overprescribed and was taking too much, and knew I was really going down a slippery slope when I started combining those substances and using them on more of a daily versus, okay, now let's taper off those meds, or let's maybe not have as many drinks. So, yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Like you said, kind of moving from something that you're choosing to do or something that's helping you to something that you need. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm curious, what are some misconceptions people have about substance use?
I would say one of the biggest misconceptions is that it only affects certain types of people, right? It's only like, maybe it's the unhoused population, or maybe it's like the very wealthy because they have access to money and can get these substances. But in all reality, addiction truly does not discriminate. Mine started, with the injury and the prescription. So I chose to use those drugs to help with the pain that I was having, but I didn't choose to become addicted to them. So I think that's a big thing for people to really understand. Another misconception I would say is that people have to hit rock bottom. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it looks differently for everyone. I mean, I got to a point where I was using alcohol, and then the alcohol gave me so much anxiety that I went to a doctor and she gave me benzodiazepines to calm that anxiety. And then I was using alcohol and benzodiazepines, which can be very lethal. And so I knew towards the end that I wasn't the same Patricia that I was 13 years ago. So that was my rock bottom. Some people think rock bottom is like jail or even death or whatever it can be, or, very catastrophic. It doesn't have to be that. I want people to know that it looks different for everyone, and it's okay to reach out for help at any stages. You could be feeling suicidal at a time, right? And so that could be your rock bottom, or it could be you lost your job, right? So it varies from different person to different person.
There's a fine line when you're trying to deal with someone who's under the influence of substances. I mean, it is hard to communicate with them if they're, inebriated. And so try to find a time when they're either coming off the substance before they start using again, to have a sit down conversation with them, to talk to them about, like, what's going on. You can point out things like, hey, I heard you lost your job at wherever, how can I support you? And then, come with resources too. I think the biggest thing for my family was the education piece, you know, because I remember my mom saying, "Oh my gosh, you're an alcoholic. Like, you can't stop drinking. Like, what's going on?" And I just felt so judged. And that happened. I think I was year 10 in my addiction. I still had about 3 more years. And it was like, I didn't want to talk to her about it because she was judging me. And so the more education that she got, the more education that I got about the harm I was doing, the better it was, not only for me to get better, but for our relationship to mend after I fully got off of all the substances I was on at the time. And for me, I chose to go through detox at a treatment center because I needed that level of care. But there are multiple levels of care that work for all different types of people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm I'm kind of struck by the ability for your relationship to mend
Oh,
after, such a long time of, harm being done to, it sounds like, to yourself, to
yeah.
your mom, a lot of people in your life and the dynamics between them. Um, and I find it really, really interesting that education was the big
Yeah.
one. I think that must have come with some growing compassion
Yeah,
for both of you.
absolutely. Absolutely. And even to this day, being 7 years, in recovery, I still remind my parents, I still remind family members, like, they'll say a comment that's maybe, a little bit more stigmatizing. And then I'll say, well, remember when this,
Mm.
and they'll say, oh, yeah, that's right. I remember. Oh, okay. And so they're looking at that person differently. So it's recovery for me is daily. I mean, this doesn't, my substance use disorder doesn't just go away because I took out the substances. This is a daily thing that I wake up and it is the most important thing in my life. I mean, I have a husband and a daughter and a baby that's due in August, and they're the most important things to me in my life, but my recovery has to come first. And so
Mhm.
if I don't have my recovery, I don't have my family. I don't have this wonderful job I have. I don't have, amazing people that I get to talk to on this podcast. I don't have anything, and I recognize that. So I think education is really important, and hearing about other people's stories,
Mhm.
how they've survived what they went through, I think is so important. So, yeah.
Yeah, so do I. I'm so, so glad that you're here doing that for us right now.
No, thank you.
Now, you talked about coming with resources and you talked about how to know when it's time to move to a
Mhm.
different level of care. And so I wanted to say we will do our normal list of resources at the end. So that is
Great.
coming. But I'm wondering, how can a person know, either they themselves or the loved ones, that a situation might need urgent support or to move to professional care?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is just like safety concerns. I know mixing substances can be lethal. So for me, it was alcohol and benzos, which is severe withdrawals symptoms. Coming off of alcohol can, lead to delirium, tremors, major decline in functioning. I know, a lot of people are using fentanyl. So if they're not testing their substance
Mm.
before they're using, that could be really harmful as well. So I think, someone obviously, if they're not breathing, uh, they're at a spot where they need, professional support, calling 911, so that a 911 or a medical professional can provide them with like Narcan and revive them that way. But I think, combining any type of drug can be definitely lethal. Also looking at how they're using the drug, if they're using it through like an IV, if they're using it orally, they're snorting it, vice versa. There are healthier ways to use substances. So learning about that, I think, is really important. But yeah, seeking out, medical attention as soon as possible, especially when using opioid related substances.
I feel like you've given us such a great background of how to know it's a problem, what it might look like. I think you've mentioned a few times that your recovery process is something that you think about a lot. And I'm wondering if you could describe, what does recovery look like in real life? I know that it's different for everyone. There's some stereotypes, but if we're
Yeah.
looking at moving forward out of use and into recovery, what does recovery look like in a day-to-day or even a long-term basis for people?
So recovery is not like a one size fit all, right? For me, it's a combination of things. So I went to detox. I did treatment, an inpatient treatment, and I did outpatient treatment. I still do individual therapy. I did some 12-step work. And then I've joined some community peer-based recovery programs here in Colorado. And so it's, it's building a life that I don't want to escape from. And it's a life that I can navigate the ups and downs. When I was in addiction, it was either I was very up or very, very down, kind of that, manic to depression. And so I never could just get, just kind of that normal feeling of what life is. Like I can recognize if, I'm having a bad day, what do I need to do? I need to, call another person who's in recovery and let them know, hey, I'm struggling today, or connect with, I think connection is key for me, connecting with another person, some type of volunteer work. I do a lot of volunteer work in the recovery community. And so I'm just grateful that I have this life, I have this family, this career. I'm able to love myself again. I think that was really a huge thing for me, is that during active addiction, I truly didn't love myself. I didn't appreciate who I was. And then once I got this clear head and was able to learn about, the things that I really needed to learn how to cope and not depend so much on these substances to kind of numb me out, I got to a place where I was really happy.
Yeah.
And so I'm just so grateful to be there. And, I'm definitely not perfect in my recovery. A lot of people around me have experienced, some relapses or return to use. Luckily, I have not. But I think if anybody has had that, the time that you've spent in your recovery is should be meaningful. It should be, something that you have worked so hard on. And it's just a matter of resetting what happened and getting back, back into life again. So there are multiple ways. We are so lucky now that there are multiple ways to get sober. It's not just going to an AA meeting or 12-step program meeting. There's sober and recovery communities throughout the country that are able to support you, and finding connection with another peer, I think, is really meaningful. So
I was thinking about how much you are involved in the addiction community. You were
yeah.
saying that every day fighting your addiction or continuing to recover is an everyday thing. And at first I was thinking, that's something that you're doing internally. And of course you have
Mhm.
your career as well. But to hear all of the different things that you're doing, the community work, the volunteering, the peer support,
Yeah.
really incredible. It's really foundational.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, okay, for somebody listening,
hmm
what is the one thing that you want them to remember?
Recovery is possible. There's more ways to get there. If you're struggling, or if you know someone that's struggling, you're not alone. There I don't know the statistics, but it's amazing when I share my story about my my addiction to people. People will say, "Oh, my mom, went through that, and my dad, and my uncle, or I went through it." And so, I think it is possible if you want to live a life where substance free, or you're living using certain types of substances, but they're not affecting your life. I mean, there's a lot of different ways recovery is defined. It's not just being sober. But I just do believe that recovery is possible, and there's different ways now that we can support one another. And I think getting connected into a peer recovery group, asking questions, learning from what other people have done, I think is something that has been foundational in my own recovery. And I'm extremely grateful for those who have been so vulnerable and shared their stories with me over the years. And I hope to continue to share my own story and share that recovery is possible for other people. So yeah, please reach out and let me know how I can support any of the viewers as well. Just an honor to be here today. Thank you.
It's an honor to have you. I really enjoyed getting to hear your story.
Thank you.
So I'm going to share a few resources now that are mostly local to East Tennessee. Some of them are available statewide and one even nationwide. So for practical, non-judgmental support for things like syringe exchange, Narcan, rapid HIV and hepatitis testing, wound care, getting connected with medical services. There is the Choice Health Network's harm reduction program. It's totally anonymous. You don't need any ID. You can just show up and ask for help, and they will tell you what they can provide and get that to you at no cost. If you're looking for something more structured, the McNabb Center's residential rehabilitation program. And if you remember, McNabb is the mobile crisis service provider that we interviewed last month. And so their residential rehabilitation program provides short-term residential care with counseling and group therapy, along with medical support, and they have financial assistance options as well. For children and teens, there are a few really cool residential and outpatient services here in Knoxville. But for the children and teens, Knox County Children and Youth Center offers a whole range of services from outpatient to intensive programs and behavioral support, mostly focused on substance use and mental health. The Tennessee Red Line is a statewide referral line that can help connect you to mental health and substance use services anywhere in Tennessee. They are run by peers with great training. They're very knowledgeable. And if you or somebody that you know may be at risk of an overdose actively, there is the Safe Spot Overdose Prevention Hotline. It's 24/7. It's run by people with lived experience, and they offer immediate support and guidance in those critical moments where an overdose could be happening. So again, all of those resources and maybe more will be available on our website and linked in the podcast notes, so you can get that contact information, refer back to it, and find the tools that you need. You're not alone. You told us that, Patricia, and it's so true. You're not alone. Help is out here.
That's right.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much. We appreciate everybody sticking with us here. Thanks, Patricia, for being with us once again. And we will see you all next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye.